I saw earlier today, and there were many. Jon Machota covering the Cowboys like a blanket. They had this OTA practice. Cowboys left tackle Tyron Smith experiencing lower back tightness, so he did not participate. They don't need him now, but they will need him in the fall. But, John, isn't that almost with him day to day, whether it's now or in the fall?
Oh, absolutely. And it's one of these things that I feel like we all should be used to by now. But at the same time, I thought it was, out of everything we got to see, talking to players in the locker room, in terms of Dallas Cowboys football things of today, I thought that might be the most interesting, because it's like, if he's not going through OTAs, because now Mike McCarthy did say it was precautionary, but still, if you're not going through OTAs, then, and it's back related, and he's obviously had a lot of back and neck issues. How can you expect during the season, like, not only to, like, playing games, but to even practice during the week? If this is the time of year when everybody should be pretty much healthy. And so I don't know, man. It's just another one of those things where you're just like, did you do enough to address that position? And is it something that still needs to be addressed? Can you count on him? Because the days of counting on him for 16, 17 games are done, but you'd think you might be able to get 10 or 11 out of him. But if he's missing the first OTA session already with some back tightness, I mean, that's just not a great sign.
Well, the swing tackle is now the right tackle in Terrence Steele. They drafted a guy who's a tackle guard in the first round. So I'm just kind of curious as what the long-term plan would be if it is something serious. Do you kick Tyler Smith out to left tackle where he's going to wind up anyway? What if he's not ready? You know, there's a lot of questions that really makes happen.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, because when I hear that, it just makes me think that I don't think that they're going to rush Tyler Smith into that, let's say, in OTAs or minicamp. But I think what it'll end up being is that they might give him more work at left tackle during training camp in the preseason than maybe they had originally planned. I just got the feeling that after they drafted him, it was like, let's just get him in at left guard. And from here or there, every once in a while, we'll start getting him some left tackle reps. But mainly, let's just get him in the left guard. Let him get him situated there for his rookie season. And then we'll slowly start putting more stuff on his plate. But if this stuff keeps happening with Tyron, I feel like they just have to work Tyler Smith even more over at left tackle. And if that means, Connor McGovern's your starting left guard, so be it. But, Matt Waletzko is a guy that they could present. I mean, that's a guy we saw getting some work over there today. Josh Ball is a guy that we saw him working at right tackle behind Terrence Steele, but he could obviously get some run there as well. But it's not a great situation, because it's such an important position on an offensive line that was so disappointing last year. I just don't see how this offensive line can be better than it was last year without Tyron Smith. I mean, I think Tyler Smith could be a good player one of these days down the road. I just don't think it's going to be this year.
John, I know there's probably going to be a lot of overreactions to just simply OTAs and whatnot, but one of the players' names I feel like I saw mentioned a couple of times was safety Marquis Bell. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, no, he certainly looks the part. I mean, he's a playmaker. I think the interception he had, it was on the far side from us, so he might have stepped out of bounds, and maybe it wouldn't have been an interception in an actual game, but it looked sweet, and from where we were sitting, it looked like it was legit. But it's that coupled with just stuff I've been hearing from, people in the organization about him. They liked him a lot, and he's got some position flex there of almost like a little bit like a Keanu Neal, where they believe he can come down and play some linebacker too. So, they didn't have a 7th round pick, but I feel like if they did, they would have used it on him. They like him a lot. I think he has a really good chance of making this team. Generally speaking, the Cowboys keep 4 safeties, and so that 4th spot would probably come down to Bell or Israel Mukuamu, or they might be able to keep 5 and keep Mukuamu too, because if they think that Bell has that type of position flex that he can also help at linebacker, maybe you go thin at another spot because of that. But, from everything I've heard through rookie minicamp, through this first, day of OTAs that we got to see, he passed the eye test. I mean, he looks like a guy that he's going to be fun to watch in the preseason and in training camp, because he looks like a playmaker, and they can certainly use that in the back end. So, yeah, for an undrafted guy, he's got a good chance of making the team.
John, I'm curious, after yesterday's events in Uvalde, we had Van McElroy on today, who's from there, the great safety from the Raiders and also played with Baylor. Was that part of the discussion today when the players or Coach McCarthy were available?
It was. And Coach McCarthy has a couple of young daughters, elementary school age. And you could tell it really hit home for him. He got choked up multiple times while talking about it. And then Demarcus Lawrence was very outspoken about it because, as you guys probably saw, he was pretty outspoken immediately yesterday on Twitter after the news had surfaced. And then for me, when Dak Prescott talked about it, it kind of resonated with me probably a little bit more than maybe others because I don't have kids and neither does Dak. But like Dak said, he goes, you see things like this happen and it makes you like nervous about even having children for people that don't because of just how crazy this world is. And that, I don't know, I could really relate where he's coming from. That just like, it's one of these things where it's something that's on your mind that I don't know if people had always been thinking of maybe 20, 30 years ago when you're having kids, like bringing children into the world and thinking like stuff like this could happen. And Dak is, he's just so well spoken and it doesn't matter what you ask him about football, off the field, on the field, whatever. He never really seems like he's caught off guard. He always has something very thoughtful to say. And Demarcus Lawrence the same way on it. But you could just tell that, like, I don't know, man, like these guys, you got the feeling that, it really bothers them. And not just because like Demarcus Lawrence has kids too, but just the fact that they're in these positions of, people look to them, even though, there's plenty of people that say, oh, just play ball and you're an athlete and, whatever. But they all have strong feelings about it. And they all said that it's something that they've been talking about in the locker room, that, they want to do and help out any way that they can.
Jon, Ezekiel Elliott enters an interesting season this year where he's got more pressure on him than he maybe ever has. Do you think he feels that, that he needs to get back to at least somewhat close to his old self or he's going to be looking for a job?
Yeah, he's a smart guy. I guarantee you he's very aware of that. We didn't get to talk to him today. And when we do get a chance to talk to him, he'll say all the right things. But you would have to – he's not the type of person that doesn't know what's being said on the outside. Zeke knows. He knows how big this year is. He knows that the way his contract is and how they can move on from him in the offseason. Heck, his locker was 3 spots over from Amari Cooper's. And, that's the guy that's been in the locker room for a decent amount of time since Zeke's been here. And he sees that, Amari – it's not like Amari had a bad year last year, but Amari didn't have a good enough year for the Cowboys to feel like he was worth continuing to pay what he's getting paid. And so you can certainly see if Ezekiel Elliott doesn't have a big year, if you're Ezekiel Elliott, why wouldn't you sit there and go, well, they'll be thinking the same thing about me if I don't put up these big numbers. And then on top of it, you're a running back. And everyone sees across the league how the positions become so devalued. So, yeah, no, there's no question that he has to be aware of that and know that this has to be a big year for him. But with me, I personally think that it comes down to a health thing. If Ezekiel Elliott's healthy, I think he can take care of business. I still think he's got tread left on the tire, but he can't have, partially torn PCL, ligaments in week 4 and then play the rest of the season out with it. I don't know Bo Jackson in his prime. I don't know if he would have been able to be very productive through that. So, it really is going to come down to health, but that's the nasty part about the business is that he can do everything right in the off season and he can get into the regular season. He can play good for 4 or 5 games. He suffers some type of an injury and then the numbers just don't match up. And then he's not a Cowboy in the off season, but that's just the way that the game is. And that's how things go. But no, there's just no way he's not aware of how big this year is for him.
Is there video evidence that, and we could see that he was, again, like most running backs, probably started to get beat down a little bit, plus of his age and the tread on his tires. Were there some video evidence of a play that may have been pretty good with him in September that by mid to late October, whatever, it just was junked up and he couldn't get the hole?
And I don't have a play per se right off the top of my head that I can think of, but there is just something about when you watch Ezekiel like right now or in training camp or even early in the season, not just this year, but the last couple of years. And he just, to me, his quickness, his lateral movements, they remind me of like 2016, 2017 Zeke. And then you get into the season and maybe a month in or so like that. And obviously now we found out after the season was over that injury actually was suffered in week 4. He just doesn't look as explosive. And I know that might be too simplistic, but that's how it is. He just doesn't look like he has that extra burst. There was a time when in those first couple of years where, he was a legitimate home run threat and you just really don't see that anymore. And then the other thing is too, is like when you did see him like that, generally speaking, it came off of a week where recently where he hasn't played the week before. Whether it be a bye week or they sat him the week before, or they had a something week one or something like that, but they didn't play the week. That's usually when he looks like himself. But I don't know. Zeke to me is just an example of how you just can't be this like Jerome Bettis, like battering ram running back in the NFL and last very long. I go back to that very first time where he, kind of exploded on the scene for the Cowboys in that preseason game against Seattle, up in Seattle. And he's putting his head down and lowering the boom on Cam Chancellor and Bobby Wagner. And he's showing you, hey, I'm here, Earl Thomas. It's just like, yeah, and that's impressive. And you can do that for a year or two, but to have any longevity at that position, you have to be a guy that makes people miss. And just frankly, in the last couple of years, Ezekiel Elliott hasn't made enough guys miss.
So one more thing, Dak Prescott has a new locker room neighbor. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's funny because this is only the third time now after rookie minicamp we've been able to be in the locker room. And talking to CD today, I just kind of looked up and I was like, oh, your locker is right next to Dak. I know it wasn't like that, but was it like that last year? We weren't allowed in there, And he was like, no, Dak, I was down here, but Dak asked me, to move next to him, because who had been in that locker before is Amari. And then so Amari is out, and so obviously there was an opening there, and Dak, requested that they move CD over there because he knows how important CD is to the success of the team and how much they need to get on the same page. Obviously, with CD now being the number one, and so CD said they've been working a lot, this offseason, whether it be at Dak's house or up at the facility. Like it's very clear between talking to those two guys today, like how important they know one is to the other's success, and so because of that. You don't want to have anything where you guys aren't on the same page on Sundays. And so I think that's why it helps also because they need to be in constant communication. Because I'm telling you, I don't see CeeDee Lamb being used like Amari Cooper, where, Amari Cooper for the most part would run, he was running routes like a traditional wide receiver. The way I see them using CeeDee Lamb, it's going to be on the outside, it's going to be in the slot. They're going to use him out of the backfield. They're going to throw to him out of the backfield. Like they're going to do more things with him that you see a Deebo Samuel type guy do than they were ever doing with Amari Cooper, that they were ever doing with Dez Bryant. Now that's also the evolution of the game and things like that. And obviously you can't use him exactly like Deebo because Deebo's a bigger guy, but CD said he gained 10 pounds this offseason. He's been working on it because he knows the usage he's about to get. So it's going to be interesting to see the way they mix him in, but it ain't going to be just as a traditional wide receiver. They're going to be using him in a variety of ways.
Thanks for your time, John. As always, great stuff. Jon Machota, theathletic.com, covering the Cowboys in the NFL and also part of our show Wednesdays throughout all 12 months of the year. I wonder, he's not Deebo Samuel because there's maybe only one of him, but there may be a way for them to try to mix in a little bit with him getting the ball in his hands from different ways, different angles, not just down the field, but maybe around the line of scrimmage. I just don't know how much he would hold up to that.
Well, I do wonder how much the offense morphs in that they're going into a year where they have to prepare as if Zeke is not the same. And I think last year they prepared that Zeke was going to be Zeke, the one that they knew. Now they're going in, they have to prepare that if he's not the focal point of the offense, and how much more creative does that make you get? Because if you watch the Cowboys early part of the season last year, they have the most creative offense in the league. Zeke starts to get banged up, and their offense isn't really that creative anymore because it was all kind of based around, as long as we have Zeke, we can do all these other things with all these great wide receivers we have. But once Zeke got banged up, it changed everything. And they were even reticent to turn over things to Tony Pollard, for whatever reason. So they went from having this great diverse offense to, you kind of know what's going to come.
Here's from Clarence Hill, who was at that high school or the Texas Sports Hall of Fame induction on Saturday for Shereen Williams. The increased use of plan of Tony Pollard, full effect at Cowboys OTAs. They opened team drills with Pollard on the field with Ezekiel Elliott and Pollard lined up in the slot. Again, it's OTA, but still they are working and tweaking a few things along the way. When we come back, Paul